behalf of the Yolo County Taxpayers Association, I would like to welcome you to this evening's forum. I'd like to start off with pledging allegiance to the flag. Please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are very fortunate tonight to have two candidates running for district attorney. It's a very important office. I would like to introduce them to you. Cynthia Rodriguez and Jeff Reisig. They will tonight speak. Our forum, or we're going to give each one of them 10 minutes to introduce themselves. After the 10 minutes, with our cards on the table, and if you have any questions for either one of the candidates, please fill out a card. We will collect them. Then we will have Tim Blank read the questions to each one of the candidates, and each one of the candidates will have the opportunity to answer the question. This is a night where we can exercise our right to listen. These people have a lot to say, and we appreciate it. Restrooms are at the back side of the building. I turn this over to Timothy.
I just wanted to mention that we probably won't have enough time for all of the cards to be read. So we're going to select at least 10.
Yes, and something else that I want to make sure that everybody realizes it, that the Yolo County Taxpayers Association is a non-partisan group. We focus more on tax regulation, the way taxes are spent. We're fortunate tonight to put this, or host this function. Are you ready?
Thank you. Make sure Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yes. I'm in a commercial. Good evening. My name is Cynthia Rodriguez, and I'm running for Yolo County District Attorney. It's great to be here tonight. It's a great pleasure to see all of you here. Thank you for showing up, and thank you so much to the Yolo County Taxpayers Association for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to share with you my vision of the Yolo County District Attorney's Office. I first moved to Winters in 1988 with my husband and children. We raised 4 kids on a farm on the west side of town, just outside of the city limits. And I just love being in Yolo County. I think this is a beautiful county and a lot of great people with a lot of diversity, and we have a real treasure here. As an attorney, I've practiced for 40 years. Oh, now I hear it. I've gained a lot of understanding of the criminal justice system from the many different jobs I've held, and they all basically pertain to criminal justice. When I started, I prosecuted employment law cases against people at corrections who had misconduct. That includes both correctional officers and other staff. It was a very great opportunity. I've been to most of the prisons in the state, and I've seen how the prisons function, and I worked with a lot of wonderful people there over those years. I also worked at the Public Defender's Office in 2 counties, as well as in Sacramento for the state. In that role, I got to defend people's constitutional rights and to make sure that people who were innocent did not go to prison. And I also learned a lot about the complex issues involved in the courtroom, and I think any of us would be glad to have an attorney appointed if we were facing the very difficult situation of defending ourselves in our complex legal system. After that, I worked at the Department of Mental Health for the state of California for almost a decade as the general counsel and deputy director of that department. I led the forensics unit and the attorney staff, and I had an office of over 200 people. I grew the attorney staff from about 5 to over 40 when I left, and I served as an advisor to both the governor's office, the legislature, and Health and Human Services on the issues involved in the mental health issues in our state, as well as the mental health hospitals and the prisons' very large population of mentally ill people who they are very ill-equipped to deal with because that's not their mission. Their mission is safety inside the walls. I've seen firsthand how to effectively protect the needs of the most vulnerable while prioritizing public safety and watching and protecting taxpayer funds. We can't continue to harm our communities with policies that have proved ineffective, wasteful, overspending, and even dangerous. My goals as a district attorney are that I'm going to listen to you, the taxpayers of Yolo County, the residents of Yolo County, and the community of Yolo County. This office is a great community office. We need to be very, very focused on taking care of this county and this county's many people who have a lot of great opportunity, but also have to learn to work within the law and all the issues that arise in daily life. So this opportunity is given to us to make the most of, and my office will make sure that people continue to have opportunity while safety is prioritized and taken care of. I will oversee the tens of millions of dollars that are given every year to the DA's office by prioritizing safety, using a vigorous application of cost-effective diversion and education programs that actually work to stop the cycle of crime and the frequent return of offenders to the bloated and expensive prison system, and to bring justice and integrity to Yolo County. I'm running because this county needs a DA who prioritizes public safety, community safety, champions equal justice, and leads with integrity and compassion. Today, Yolo County faces a lot of growing problems over the last many years that have not been stemmed. We have a very large homeless population who have nowhere to sleep at night. It's not a pretty picture. People are building shelters, even made of wood, in our communities as well as on our hillsides and in our private property and public grounds. And this is a very dangerous, health risky situation, and it's a sign of how desperate some people are. People are going under due to unemployment, underemployment, drug use, alcohol problems, and the short-term jail sentences are not resolving those problems. The prison sentences that are not stopping the crime cost $100,000 per year per person, and yet when people leave those prison sentences, there's over 65% return to prison very soon thereafter. So we know this has not been a very good investment. If this was an investment people were making with their money, they would not continue to go there. Putting people in a system which does not stop their misbehavior or stop the criminal acts on the public is not a system we can continue to support, especially at the extremely large cost that it has. There's been an increased number of property crimes in the last few years, and increased fear in the cities and countryside of theft and violence. Our county needs to adopt effective ways, less outlandishly expensive ways of dealing with these problems. We cannot incarcerate or anger our way out of social and criminal tragedies. We must bring to Yolo the methods that have a record of success in changing behavior. I have seen those methods used in other counties and at the state level. They already exist. After 16 years of longer and longer sentences, more and more millions thrown at incarceration, which will reach $20 billion this year in the CDCR correctional unit, as well as not using the programs that are most effective and lowest cost, we can no longer afford to keep acting this way. We need to use the systems that we understand and understand what is actually happening in the prisons, which we know to be criminals learning more about crime, people getting angry at others who are the haves and they are the have-nots, and also people learning the behavior that is the only thing that will work for them once they have these terrible records of a long time in prison. Instead, what we really need to do is turn this all around. We need to treat mentally ill people. We need to shelter homeless. We need to have drug and alcohol programs so that addicted people with problems and can have medication as well as treatment and understanding so that they can change their lives. Even our current DA is touting these reformative programs as he goes around the county. But the problem is he's already dedicated millions, tens of millions of dollars to incarceration, which is going to go on for years and years in the future.
2 minutes.
We have to remember that the programs he has said that will help save money, like mental health court, under this administration, only accepts about 33 people every year and a half. That's not enough to make a difference in the number of mentally ill people who enter our criminal justice system, nor is it enough to change the lives of the people who enter prison or jail. They do not come out better. We have to continue to know that people with mental health issues and people with drug issues, you and I all know somebody who've had either of those issues, and that once they get treatment, they do come out and do better. They do come out and become safe people that we're willing to be around. We must bring diversion and education programs to the fore, not just for a few residents of a single city in this community, as the current program is long favored, but to all the residents of Yolo County, so that when our children make mistakes in their youth, such as trying drugs or committing a crime on a dare, they don't end up with a criminal record that keeps them from having a good life. And we know that the diversion programs and the education programs have the lowest recidivism rate, the lowest rate of people who commit another crime afterwards. And that is a good investment. I'm committed to leading the DA's office that uplifts victims, increases public safety, and offers fair treatment and justice. With the right leadership, I know we can do it. Thank you for your time.
Well, good evening. My name is Jeff Reisig. I'm the District Attorney of Yolo County, and I've been the DA for 16 years, starting my 16th year. And before that, I was a Deputy DA for 10 years. So going on 25 plus years as a prosecutor in this county. And during that time, I've tried every kind of case you can imagine, from the worst murders to rapes to child molests to robberies and DUIs and everything in between. And frankly, in order to do this job, you have to have the experience to manage those types of cases and people that handle those cases. I'm also proud to tell you that last year I was elected the president of the California District Attorneys Association, which represents DAs from San Diego and Imperial County all the way north to Modoc and Siskiyou and almost everywhere in between. And the reason that's important is because those are DAs of all stripes, of all different political leanings, and they elected me the president because they trust me and they respect me, and I speak for them when we go to the state capitol. So I want to kind of start my real comments tonight by asking you a question. Why should you care who the DA is? Why should anybody care? You know, it's an important question that a lot of people, they don't know. They don't know who their DA is. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that who the DA is may be the most important elected official in a local community, in any location, in any place, because there's 58 counties in California, and in every single county you have an elected DA. And he or she has the discretion to decide which cases to charge and not charge. It's an incredible amount of power. And there is no oversight. Once the DA is elected, the next time you're judged is 4 years later. There's nobody that decides whether you're making a bad decision or not. And as you look around the nation and you look around California, what you have seen is that there have been DAs who were elected that have chosen to ignore the law. They've chosen to institute their own, sometimes radical view, their ideology into the job. And in some cases, these DAs have decided to ignore the law, to not prosecute certain crimes, theft, burglaries, urinating in public, open drug use, vandalism. And in other cases, DAs have decided to participate in the mass release of prisoners from jails and prisons with no bail and no oversight and no accountability. Other DAs in parts of California have decided not to pursue gang enhancements and gun enhancements. These are incredible acts of power. And whether you agree with that or not, my point is who the DA is matters. It is one of the most important decisions you can make. so choose wisely. Well, what do I believe? Well, over the last 16 years as your DA, I've really tried to lead the office in a balanced manner. Yeah, I'm tough, but I'm also fair. And what I believe is that the American justice system is the best in the world. But I'll be the first to tell you that it's not perfect. And there's a lot of things that we need to do to fix it. And I've been trying to fix it in my own way for the last 16 years. But unlike some people, I absolutely do not believe that the way to fix the criminal justice system is to tear it down, burn it down, or defund it. I don't believe in any of that. Hard stop. Instead, what I believe is that the correct formula for managing the criminal justice system and improving the criminal justice system is much more nuanced. It's much more balanced. It's much more in between. It's much more data-driven. It's much more like threading a needle. Because you see, during my tenure, I've developed a lot of beliefs about what the system is and what it isn't. And I'm going to tell you what I believe. What I believe is that we can pursue public safety and reforms at the same time. I believe that we can take care of victims of crime and treat offenders fairly at the same time. I believe that we can treat mental illness and treat addiction with empathy and care and compassion, but not allow our streets to be turned into spots of disease and decay and death and lawlessness. I believe that we have to have strong relationships with the police, but we have to hold them accountable always to the highest standards. Those are just some of the things I believe. You know, a few months ago, the Sacramento Bee called me and they said, hey, we want to come out and do a story on you in the office. And frankly, I was a little bit nervous. But I said, come on out. And I opened the doors to the office. I gave them full access. They talked to anyone that they wanted to. And they looked at whatever they wanted to. And they wrote a story. And when the headline came out, I was really surprised, because what the headline said was, quote, California's most innovative prosecutor might be in Yolo County. It was awesome, and I was really happy with that. But you know, what I told the Sacramento Bee writers, the editorial writers, when they met with me is what I told you tonight, that doing this job is like threading a needle. You know, on the one hand, as DA, I have been tough on crime. I've gone after child molesters and rapists and murderers and the worst of the worst, absolutely. But at the same time, I've embraced reasonable reforms. I've wrapped my arms around restorative justice when it's appropriate. I started robust mental health courts that have been incredibly successful to help the mentally ill because I care. I started an addiction intervention program to help the seriously addicted because I believe that we don't need to send those people to prison or jail, they need help. And I started those programs, they never existed before me. Last year, I partnered with Measures for Justice, a national leader in data transparency. And I started a data transparency portal called Commons. First in the nation, first DA in the nation to do this, where any member of the public can now log on and look at the DA's data and break it down by race, age, gender, whatever you want to look at. I was the first to do that because I believe in transparency. Last year, I also partnered with Stanford University, and we created a first-of-its-kind program that strips race out of the police reports. So when my prosecutors are charging cases, we are doing it not knowing the race of the people involved. Lady Justice is truly blind in my office, and that is now built into the DNA of our case management system, and it's a beautiful thing. So the Sacramento Bee concluded its article by writing, quote, Reisig's approach is a model for modern prosecutors everywhere. That's what they said. And you know what? I humbly agree. I think that there is room to do it all. You can do public safety, you can do reform. The extremes are where we get in trouble. So a lot of people say, hey Jeff, you've done all this stuff, what's next? Why are you running for a 5th term? And I say, well, I've got bad news and I've got good news. The bad news is violent crime is going off through the roof. Murders are up, shootings are up, robberies are up. We're looking across California, we all see it, we all know it. At the same time, we're seeing smash and grabs, robberies. People are going into stores in hordes and stealing property and destroying businesses. Retailers are suffering. People are underreporting crime. At the same time, we're seeing massive overdose deaths. More people died in America of an overdose last year than ever before. 100,000. Biden called it an epidemic. At At the same time, in San Francisco, more people, twice as many people died of opioid overdose as COVID. And finally, we have a homelessness crisis that is out of control. This is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. It's tragic. People are mentally ill, they're addicted, they're living in disease and decay and filth on the street, and they're dying. And at the same time, they're causing an erosion of the quality of life for all of us.
2 minutes.
None of this is okay. So I've got the good news. The good news is there's a lot of people here that still care. There's a lot of people that haven't packed up their cars and their U-Hauls and left yet. And I'm one of them. And I have a strategy and I have a plan to address these issues. On violent crime, I'm a violent crime specialist. I just told you, I spent 25 years tackling the worst of the worst. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. We don't like child molesters, rapists, murderers, right? We agree. I'm going to double down on going after the worst of the worst. I'm going to work with law enforcement to make sure that we're taking care of those victims and those crimes the way we should. On the property crime, two-prong approach. First of all, zero tolerance on these smash and grabs. You know, these hordes of people that are coming in and breaking stores and tearing them apart. Zero tolerance. We sent that message. I'm working with law enforcement. We are absolutely going to send the message, don't do that in Yolo County. But at the same time, we need to change the law. The law is broken in California. When you can go into a store and steal every single day and not have any accountability, that's broken. I'm going to use my voice, I'm going to use my experience, and I'm going to keep telling people that. We need to fix it. Now that doesn't mean we send people to prison and jail for long terms, but dang it, there's got to be accountability. Governor Newsom said that. On the opioid crisis, two-prong approach. First, drug dealers. People that deal drugs need to be held accountable. We're going to hold them accountable. I've told them, if you sell drugs and somebody dies because they take your drugs, you could be charged with homicide. That's not a joke. It's real. It's deadly serious. People are dying all over our county. But we're also going to engage in a massive public awareness campaign. 15 seconds? Yeah. We're going to educate the public. Tell them, be careful. Watch out. This stuff's killing you. My last point, homelessness. I have a plan. Go to www.jeffreisig.com. Look at my plan. I'm happy to say that people are adopting the provisions of my plan. The governor himself just released a plan that has one of the things that I've been talking about for years in the plan. I'm hopeful. So in closing, look, I have passion for the job. I think you can see that. I've got the skills. I've got the experience. I hope I have your support.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that wants to ask a question, please get the cards filled out.
Well,
Give us a few minutes.
This is the last round here.
Give us just a few minutes here, go through the cards and get ready for questions. Like I say, the question will be a 3-minute and it will be for each candidate. Thank you. Regarding the Yolo County Taxpayers Association, I might as well put a plug in for us. We don't get an audience like this very often. We've been around since the early 60s. It's a well-organized group. We, like we say, we are non-partisan. We concern ourselves with taxes, with bonds. We are like everybody else in the community. We understand that you need taxes to run the community. Sometimes we question how the money's being spent, or we would like to have a little more say in how it's being spent. It's very, very expensive. I don't know what the budget is for the DA's office, but for the, how much? 25 million just for one office. The county budget is huge. And then of course you've got City of Woodland, City of Davis, all the different budgets, and running the schools. But so we understand that, we don't question every tax that's being raised. We sometimes wonder where the money is being spent, and we hope that it's being spent wisely. If anybody has any interest in joining the California Taxpayers Association, there's flyers on the table. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming this evening, and it's been a nice group. Here's Timothy Blank, and he has questions he will start off with, and see if we can get through all of them.
All right, so we had probably over 30 cards altogether, and with 3 minutes each, that's an hour with 10 cards. So sorry if you didn't get selected. We'll start here with Ms. Rodriguez. And then, so she'll have 3 minutes, get my timer, and then Jeff will have 3 minutes to respond in whatever way he wants, either to the question or to her. Ms. Rodriguez, how will you handle homeless who refuse help because they like living on the streets?
I've had this question before, and I know a lot of people are concerned because they've seen interviews or people in the streets talking about liking their freedom. I think there's two things we have to realize when we hear that. One is that living on the streets can be very demeaning and embarrassing, and that some people will say they're happy to do it, not because they love sleeping outside at night and being freezing cold and not having ready food or refrigeration or any of the things that those of us with homes have. So I do think there's a number of people who make that statement who will be willing to enter shelter. But I agree also that there will be people who are afraid of being under someone else's control. And what we have to do is turn to the experts and see what they've done with that. There are many communities, especially on the West Coast, who have been able to have successful programs to move people off the streets, to get them stabilized so they can then begin to receive the services that they need to live a more comfortable life, a more reasonable life, and a safer life, and particularly where there are children involved, because there are many, many homeless children. Those things have to be pursued. None of these programs will solve everybody's problem. We will always have outliers. We will always have some amount of criminal behavior or just unsocial behavior. But we have to go ahead and work with those that we can. And I am sure, I know from the studies that I've read, that the majority of homeless people become that way by surprise, by bad circumstances. They go down quickly or slowly, but they change their lifestyle to one that is negative instead of positive. And then they can make the climb back up if we give them the assistance that the experts show us has worked before. We can't do things just that we think up. We have to consult people who have encountered homelessness and have encountered successful shelter. So that's what I want to do, is use our resources, use other communities. It's not necessarily hiring people to do this, but it is checking into how successful programs have been run. And I think for the most part, we'll get most people off the street, because as you can imagine, it is not a very desirable life.
Should I, maybe I'll stand up when there's like
His mic doesn't work.
oh, it doesn't. All right, when there's 1 minute left, I'll stand up, or 30 seconds?
Yeah, 3 minutes, right?
You got 3 minutes. Okay.
Well, I'm so glad this question came up on homelessness, and I'm going to start by telling you, this is personal for me as well as professional. I have a nephew who I love him very much. He's been homeless for 9 years. He's addicted to heroin. He's not in this county, but he's someplace where I see him from time to time standing on the side of the road. And, you know, it breaks my heart. And so when we talk about homelessness, I talk to you as somebody that's been a DA for 25 years. I've seen it from that side. I'm also talking to you as a DA who has somebody that shares my name, that lives on the street, that uses heroin every day, that steals and creates victims every day to support his habit. And so look at my plan. Go to www.jeffreisig.com, 5-point plan. The first part of this plan is about treatment. Here's the deal, we don't need to send these people to jail or prison for being homeless. That's not the answer, right? But what are the root causes? What's driving it? What I have seen, both professionally as personally, is the vast majority of the homeless population suffer from an illness, mental illness or addiction. And addiction is mental illness. And they need help, they need treatment. Well, how do we get them into treatment, right? That's the million-dollar question. Governor Newsom right now is probably over there trying to figure out, how do we get these folks into treatment before they go out and victimize somebody or steal or do something to support their habit? Not all homeless do that, but I'm sad to say most do, because most of the homeless, according to our accounts, according to our records, are suffering from these diseases, and to survive, they have to do things. So part of the plan is mandating treatment. Well, how do we get them into treatment? Well, one of the ways is whenever they come in contact with the criminal justice system, and unfortunately they do a lot, we should be aggressively intervening to get them into a treatment program. Not jail, not prison, but here's the deal, they can't just be able to walk out the door. My nephew, he will have drugs delivered through the window. If it's a wide open facility, he'll walk out the back door. We've tried and tried and tried. He's not going to do this voluntarily. Somebody needs to tell him, you're doing this and you can't just walk away. Newsom has realized that. You know, he's talking about this in the context of the seriously mentally ill. But this is the solution for the homeless issue. We need to get serious about really focusing on treatment for the seriously ill people that are living on the streets and getting them into facilities where they can't just walk away. So that is the answer. That's what I keep advocating for. That's what my plan's all about. I ran a bill last year with Assemblymember McCarty, one of the most liberal Democrats in Sacramento. Kevin McCarty wrote a bill, I sponsored it, and it was all about getting people into treatment instead of sending them to jail or prison. This is professional and it's personal for me, and there are answers.
Next question.
Yes, she's been there 16 years.
We will start with Jeff. Due to the $950 theft as misdemeanor limit, Woodland now has a shoplifting problem, particularly among high school students. Do you promote police making arrests and victims coming forward to press charges? Or do you feel that this will burn itself out, best left to the parents to deal with, or best handled through a restorative justice program?
Well, there's a lot in there. I mean, first of all, we're talking about petty theft. I mean, the question seems to be focused on kids. And if you have juveniles that are committing these crimes, we have a whole separate juvenile system that is, it's not punitive. It's not designed to be punitive. And certainly for lower level crimes like that, we're all focused on rehabilitating these young men and women and not getting them, we don't want to lock them up, really. We want to get them on the right path, and we want to intervene in all of these situations. But this is a much bigger issue because the retail theft problem is across California, and it's what's driving these smash and grabs. We've all seen the TV stories where they're running into stores and stealing, and there's just no accountability. I personally have talked to store owners, some of whom are here, and many across the state who have told me this is killing them. They are being victimized every single day, multiple times a day, sometimes by the same people who walk in and steal and walk out. They might even come with a bag and just scoop and walk out. As long as it's under $950, nobody is going to jail because the law says those people get a ticket. That is a broken law. It's a broken law. And you know what? Democrats want to fix this as much as anybody else. This is a bipartisan issue. They just had a poll out of the LA Times. The vast majority of people said, we need to fix this. We all agree this isn't working. Now that doesn't mean that we send them to prison, but it does mean that there has to be accountability for this type of conduct. You know, I've talked to massive box store owners, people, executives that run the biggest box stores you can imagine. They have stopped reporting thefts. They've stopped because the man hours it takes to make a theft report, to go to court, to do all of the things that ultimately result in nobody being punished, they've done the cost-benefit analysis. And what they told me is that in these stores, they no longer pick up the phone and call the police, period. They just write it off as a cost of doing business. And for a mom and pop shop, that'll kill you. For the big box stores, they're making millions, they write it off. But the underreporting on this issue is epic. It's an epic underreporting issue, and it's part of the thing that we really need to get a hold of in the state is Let's just be honest, this law is not working. That's it.
Could you repeat the question?
Sorry.
Due to the 950 theft as misdemeanor limit, Woodland now has a shoplifting problem, particularly among high school students. Do you promote police making arrests and victims coming forward to press charges? Or do you feel that this will burn itself out, best left to parents, or best handled through restorative justice programs?
The law needs to be enforced. There's law, there's police, there's prosecutors who do the next level. We each have our own jobs. I'm not in charge as the DA of writing the law. I'm in charge of prosecuting the law and moving forward. I believe all those things are the right thing for those positions. I think that, the answer that we just heard about all the underreporting and all the people not being told about what's going on is very large in its exclusion to what we actually know. What are the actual facts? That people have a lot of theft that they're not reporting, or are they not reporting theft because they're not having it? Interestingly enough, we have an attorney here, our district attorney, who's telling us that he's been in charge for 16 years, and yet these crimes are increasing. I think that's a problem. They say the same thing in Sacramento, that we have a very conservative law and order district attorney, but the crimes are increasing. So I think that the first thing is that tells you that it's not because somebody wants to show compassion for juveniles or even adults at some level of whatever number of dollars the state picks to assign. And my understanding is our level is lower than 40%, I think it's 40 states or somewhere in the high 30 states have a even higher amount than we do at 950. But I don't think that's the real issue. I think the real issue is, what are we investigating? Are we investigating if this is really kids coming in and doing it, or are there ringleaders? Are our police doing the right investigation? Is our prosecutor prosecuting the right crimes? Are we looking at what the general sway is and what's going on? It doesn't seem likely to me that a few juveniles are starting these giant rings of smash and grab people. It seems likely to me that that's more organized crime, and that our investigative tools should be put to the test of figuring out what's going on out there. And we have prosecutors right now who should be doing that, and who should be finding out what the dangers are and why they picked this. It's like all crime. The truth is in what we find out, the facts we learn as we look into them, and we have to look deep into them. We can't just sweep up a few juveniles who don't know how to answer questions and don't even understand where their own best interest is, and let they take the responsibility, and some mastermind is getting away with all this. These are the kind of crimes that we keep reading about that seem a little bit larger than teens taking candy bars. It's a pretty serious set of crime, and it needs to be uncovered by our current system that's available to do so. Woo!
Cynthia, the next question is, you're starting off. Is there a problem of child sexual trafficking in Yolo County? How will you protect our children and ensure there are repercussions for adults who run these criminal operations?
I've worked a lot with juveniles. I supervised the defense juvenile programs in Solano County for many years, and I've worked in juvenile crime. And I always think that when they bring in a juvenile for a sex crime, and they do for example, prostitution or something like that, there's a huge story behind that. Juveniles aren't just up and thinking, hey, wait a minute, I know how to make money. This usually comes from a problem from the home, a problem in the community, a problem with traffickers, a problem with all kinds of things other than the juvenile is where it starts. And then the juvenile gets involved and are often treated as criminals when what they really are is victims. And so whether they're actually committing what we label as crimes themselves, or if they're just being trafficked totally without their knowing what's going on, we have to look at that really seriously. you know, I can't tell you per se what the level of sex trafficking in our county could be. I have not read about a lot of prosecutions here. I have heard talk about those crimes, but obviously that every force needs to be brought to bear to make sure that none of our children in Yolo County and none of the children who come here are subjected to such horrifying abuse. Sexual abuse comes in many forms, and that is one of them. And we need to be ever alert. You know, all officers and people on the street and people in stores need to know the signs of someone who's being trafficked, and we need to take those crimes very seriously and make sure we go to the source of those and not the juvenile who's ending up committing a crime such as prostitution because they're being manipulated and held hostage to somebody, an older person who's using their life for their profit. These are terrible crimes, and we need to be sure that our police and our prosecution units are really looking for the actual perpetrators and making sure that they don't just leave our county and go do this somewhere else, because all children's lives matter. And one of the things we see in juvenile court is so often what's happening there with the juveniles has to do with what they've encountered in their lives. The trauma, the terror, the difficulties, the horrible lack of support and investment in their future. And that needs to be changed, because we're all, as a community, going to suffer from that, and the worst suffering will be the child's. So we need to make sure that we're helping them and that we're looking for the real source of this horrifying behavior.
Sorry, it's just easier to stand. So human trafficking it's real. It's here in Yolo County. And it comes as in labor trafficking, which is happening here in Yolo, and sex trafficking. And having been, you know, a prosecutor here for 25 years in Yolo County and seeing the evolution of these crimes and how they've proliferated, a couple things that you need to know that are true. First of all, we are a hotbed for human trafficking because of Interstate 80 coming from the Bay Area, going across, and Interstate 5. And that's not my opinion, that's a fact from everybody that does this work. And because of that, we have investigated and prosecuted many, many, many human trafficking cases while I've been the DA that involved young girls, mostly, sometimes boys, but mostly young girls from Davis, from Woodland, from West Sac, from Winters. And they're being preyed upon by these pimps. That's what they are. And it's the modern day slavery is what it is. They're capturing these young girls, they're brainwashing them, and then they're putting them to work as sex slaves. It is a horrific, terrible, violent act. And in Yolo County, that's one of the crimes I've been really tough on. In fact, I was the one that started the human trafficking unit. The human traffic investigator was hired by me. We started the unit. I had support from the Board of Supervisors because I realized that this was a problem that we had to get ahead of. Now, with all of that said, you know, there are victims that come through. And in the old days, you know, these young girls, young victims may not have been treated the way they should have. That's old news. The new policing, the new approach that we actually helped implement countywide when I became the DA is to approach these young victims who we suspect might be trafficked. And we're not prosecuting them. We're being very empathetic, and the police officers, there's some here in the room that work these cases. And these are very difficult cases to get their trust and to get their confidence. But the whole goal is to get them well, to get the facts, and then to get the bad guys. And you know what? We have prisons for a reason. I'm not a big fan of sending everybody to prison, but human traffickers need to go to prison. And that's what we're trying to do in Yolo County. And it's a coordinated effort with law enforcement across the board. And that's just something that we're going to stay absolutely focused on. So.
30 seconds. Jeff, the next question is directed at you initially. Your values include the promotion of transparency and the addressing of racial bias. Commons is one of your solutions. However, the website aimed to make criminal justice statistics available to the public is inaccurate It reports identical statistics for misdemeanors and felonies. How is Yolo County meant to rely on your leadership for transparency when your solutions are unreliable?
That's a loaded question. I mean, I don't know where that comes from. That's just wrong. So the facts are, 2 years ago, I decided, hey, I want to make all of our data available to the public. I believe in government transparency, and people need to be able to look at it themselves, because I don't trust the government. And why would people, if I put it out, why would they trust me necessarily? So I went to the #1 entity in the nation. It's called Measures for Justice. Look them up. They're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization out of Rochester, New York. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm a DA in Yolo County. I want to give you unfettered access to all of our data, and I want you to create a portal that anybody can look at and see anything they want to about my case. Well, guess what? They said, wow, we'd really like to do that with you. They came out to Yolo County. They actually met with members of the Multicultural Community Council, which is a group of diverse individuals from around the county that I put together with Dr. Jesse Ortiz almost 10 years ago. And this nonpartisan group, nonprofit, nonpartisan, Measures for Justice, met with community members and asked them, what do you want to see? And they built it. I did not build it, they built it. It was the first in the nation. It was the very first transparency portal in the nation, built the way it was for the people with all of this data. The data that they are publishing comes straight out of my case management system. It goes straight to Rochester, New York, and they do the auditing. They make sure that what they're publishing there is accurate. So, you know, the question was loaded with an argument, and I get it. I mean, this is a debate. But the reality is, this transparency portal is transformational. We're leading the nation in transparency. If you got a problem with the data, you can tell us. I encourage you actually to reach out to Measures for Justice, because they're the ones that are doing it. And the bottom line is we're using that data for a couple of important things ourselves. I mean, the community has it. And the great thing about it, if you look at it, by the way, is you can go on, you can look at the data, you can break it down by race, by age, by county of residence. You can send it to the media, to lawmakers, immediately, like that. Hey, I don't like this, and you send it, you put it on Facebook or whatever you want. But what we use it for is, in our office, we actually use it to drive policy. And what I mean by that is we're going through the data on a regular basis, weekly, and we're looking at the data and we're seeing what's going on here and what can we do to adjust some of our policies to address the disparity that we're seeing. It's been a powerful tool, it's been a game-changing tool, and I'm happy to tell you that I'm going around the country helping other DAs adopt it because it's been so successful.
When I began this race, two of the many things I talked about frequently and still do are DA discretion and transparency, because I think they go hand in hand. The issue of discretion is that a DA gets to set his priorities, and she also gets to decide what is not prioritized. And in my opinion, transparency should have been prioritized from day one. And for the current administration, that was 15 years ago. So for the first time in 15 years, we finally have information listed that we can see some statistics. The problem with that is that we always deserve to see what our taxpayer dollars were being spent on and what was happening with the results of how they were being spent. And we have not until now seen that. This is not the first information put out by a DA's office. Many DA's offices have these kind of presentations of all their information about prosecutions, who's prosecuted, why, how much time they get, etc. And then on top of that, they have an analysis of those statistics, because dry statistics are basically what Will Rogers said, you know, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Just looking at statistics doesn't really tell you why something is happening. So we have to have analysis, which we do not. We have dry statistics. If you go on that portal, I've been there many times, you see numbers with no explanation for why they are what they are. You hear from people like the public defender over a year ago said, you know, in our county we have 3% African American people and we have 25% in our jail. There's no explanation time for that. At that time, she was derided by our DA, saying she was trying to attack the judiciary and the prosecution and everybody in the world. All she was doing was just citing statistics. And I believe at the time this portal became available, there was total agreement with her statement of that is going on. And yet we still have no analysis of why that is going on. None that's presented to us, the taxpayer anyway, none that we can understand why there's this difference. You know, what is going on that we would have such a racial imbalance in our system? It's completely unexplained. Additionally, 10 months later, we have no update of those statistics, so we don't know if it's still going on in exactly the same way. I think that presenting this information to the people would be meaningful if we knew what it meant and how anybody was operating on it. And if we have that big discrepancy in representation in our jail, which we have heard is actual even from the DA himself, what have they done since then to change that up? We've not received any information about that. They tell us they go daily to this information that never changes. I'm not sure why we would need to keep going back when there's still no analysis and there's still no further information. I want to make all the information available to you from day one, to update it regularly and explain to you what we're going to do about the things that are problematic in them. We need to have that information front and center. You deserve to know what is being done with your tax dollars and what is being done to community members and what needs to be done and is not being done. Woo! Yeah.
So this next question is directed to you. Please tell us specifically what you plan to do differently than our current DA.
I like to say that I have a lot of ideas. I'm not against a lot of ideas. I'm for a lot of ideas because there's so much to do that we don't need to spend our time talking about what's negative. But I will tell you that what I plan to do that's different from day one is increase the number of programs that are available for particularly first offenders and youth in order to not end up with criminal records that destroy their future, their ability to get licenses, apartments, jobs, opportunities to raise families. We all know that if you have once you have a criminal conviction, statistics tell us overwhelmingly that you have a much higher chance of going back to jail. And we know that prison is our prison system has a ridiculously high rate of return, 64 to 67%. So we need to change those things. We need to be doing education programs, which, as I said, are proven to work and are much less expensive. And all we need to do that is to take the time to develop them and to channel people into them and then give them the opportunity to do well. If they don't, they will be arrested again. But as we've seen over the years, that's not what happens. So we need to be working on those programs and plans and not on more plans to put people away from the first offense or from low-level offenses because, as I said earlier, people learn more about crime in jail and have much more likelihood to commit more crime after they are in jail. And their whole psychological makeup of themselves changes and they become more and more likely to tend toward crime and not be successful in life. So we want to stop that from happening. I want to increase diversion programs. I want to set up shelters for homeless. I know from my many years in mental health that people with serious problems like mental health and drug abuse, which is also often self-medication for people who already have problems, that once they're sheltered, they have a much higher likelihood of ending up stable. You can't start the programs first. You have to start the shelter first. That's a tried and true issue across all these programs, is that without shelter, people can't have a positive experience or stability in their lives. I also would like to immediately start making sure that people are being fair in how they present offers. I won't do overcharging. When you do overcharging that people can't possibly accept the deal that's offered based on 10 charges when it was really one incident with one situation there that can be spoken in 10 different ways, then that's how you end up with super high jury trials. That's how you end up with us having more jury trials in our county than major counties like Alameda. And that costs a lot of money. Those jury trials, we pay jurors, we pay judges, we pay courtrooms, we pay attorneys on both sides. You know, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? Why are we trying misdemeanor traffic offenses? Is that helping us, or would we do more good fixing somebody's broken taillight than sending them out to a jury trial for something that doesn't involve jail time in any case? So those are really fast, early fixes.
So, Ms. Rodriguez has never practiced law in this courthouse. I've never met her before in my 25 years as a prosecutor. I don't think she's ever been a DA or a public defender. She's never been a DA of any kind. She's been a public defender in another county. But I'm saying that because I don't think she has any idea what we've been doing here for the last 16 years. I mean, honestly, with all due respect, Ms. Rodriguez, the things that you're talking about, I've already done, and I've made model programs for the state and the nation. That's why the Sacramento Bee came out and wrote about it. I started a mental health program that is a model for reform, adopted by DAs across the state. I started an addiction intervention program that's a model for reform. I have programs to deal with juveniles. Juveniles are treated with soft gloves from the moment they come into the system in this county, as long as they're not committing a really violent crime. Now, if you're a Daniel Marsh and you're committing a double homicide, guess what? You're gonna get treated differently. But if you are a juvenile committing a minor crime, we have robust diversion programs. The probation department, some of whom are here, some of the probation officers know this. Juveniles are treated differently. Our goal is to rehabilitate them, to get them well. My commitment to juvenile intervention goes deep. My mom was a continuation high school teacher. I believe in second chances. Years ago, I partnered with Jesse Ortiz, who was the superintendent of schools, to start programs to intervene in the school-to-prison pipeline. One of the things that we've been running for years now is a youth academy, a leadership youth academy, where we're taking troubled kids, some of whom are being prosecuted by my office, by the way, and we're getting them into programs with DAs and public defenders and judges and community leaders, and we're showing them there's another way. And you know what? I've run into some of those kids down the road, and they've told me how great that was and that it saved them. And so that's just one example of the things we're doing. The other thing we're doing, started a few years ago, is we're intervening with children that have suffered adverse childhood consequences. They've had something traumatic happen. And we started a program called Focus, which is allowing frontline law enforcement officers to work with school officials, facilitated by my office, to make sure that the counselors at the school know when certain kids have suffered an adverse consequence. Could be they were a victim, a witness, something else happened. And the goal is to try and get into these schools, to get into these kids early, and to shut down this pattern that we know happens where kids end up on a bad path, and 80% of people in prison are high school dropouts. So we've been all over that. We've been all over the diversion path. So again, I would urge Ms. Rodriguez to do her homework. And all you have to do is Google Yolo County diversion, and you're going to get about 100 stories from the LA Times to Sacramento talking about the programs that we've run and how they are models for reform across the nation.
Jeff, in 2014, California voters passed Prop 47, which reduced small nonviolent offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. One of the many reasons voters passed Prop 47 was the potential savings of millions of taxpayer dollars. Mr. Reisig, why hasn't Yolo County conformed with Prop 47? Ms. Rodriguez, would you comply with this law and why?
Well, that's a confused question. To comply with Prop 47 doesn't make any sense, because what happened is in November of 2014, the voters of California passed an initiative called Proposition 47. It changed the law, period. And what it did was it decriminalized the possession of hard drugs, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, ecstasy, whatever, from felonies to misdemeanors. So prior to Prop 47, if somebody was arrested with methamphetamine, for example, they would be arrested on a felony, taken to court, and the first thing we would do is try and get them into drug treatment. That's a fact. And there were multiple attempts, again and again and again. Well, when Prop 47 changed that from a felony to a misdemeanor, what we've seen across California is a rapid drop-off in people wanting to participate in treatment at all. And the reason is there's no consequence. It's a misdemeanor. It's a ticket. It's de minimis. It's no different than walking down the street and throwing, with a beer can, open container. The other thing Prop 47 did is it lowered the property threshold or raised it, to $950. So you can steal up to $950 a day as a result of Proposition 47, and it's a misdemeanor. And so that is what's fueling, along with the addiction crisis, this rampant increase in the retail theft that we're seeing. This is a fact. This is, by the way, what my nephew does. He steals every day to support his habit. They're all misdemeanors. Using drugs, heroin, he can have heroin in his pocket, it's a misdemeanor. He can walk into the store and steal less than $9.50, it's a misdemeanor. They're gonna write him a ticket. If he doesn't show up at court, nobody's gonna come for him. And the cycle continues and continues and continues. This is what's happening. I'm telling you, we go to this courthouse every day. I charge these crimes. I charge them all. And we wait for people to show up. And about 60 to 70% never show up, ever. They're just out on the street. Some die of overdose. Others disappear. This is what Prop 47 did. It was well-intentioned. Proposition 47 had good intentions. They wanted to get more treatment to people. They wanted to reduce the penal consequences from drug users. I don't disagree with all that. It was just poorly executed. And I'm hopeful now. I'm hopeful because, again, this is a bipartisan issue now. People realize we need to fix this. There's been several Democrats that have sponsored bills to address these problems with it, also Republicans. And that's encouraging because people are realizing that we can do what we wanted to do, which is get more people into treatment and help people get well. But we can't allow people to just continue to use and steal and live on the streets. And bottom line, Proposition 47 fueled that. 100%, it fueled it. And so when somebody says, what are you going to do to comply with 47? I comply every day because it's the law. But it's broken law, and we need to fix it.
I think we need to look at what Yolo County has a right, just like every other area in the United States has, to dictate its own future. In Yolo County, 61% of the voters voted in favor of Prop 47, and 68% of the voters voted in favor of Prop 57, which eliminated certain enhancements and changed several laws. Both of those were about the long prison sentences people were serving for different reasons. And Yolo County voted in favor of changing those laws so that sentences would not be as high for simple possession as opposed to distributing or selling. In Prop 20, which was just a couple of years ago, people were given an opportunity in Yolo County and across the state to change their minds, and they did not. They voted against Prop 20 because they were still not interested in these lengthy, extremely expensive, and ill-served solutions of incarceration that does not work. So the idea that we continue in our county to have to pay to bring lawsuits against implementation of certain areas of both of those propositions when we voted in favor of them. I even have been to a talk that our DA did where he explained that people in Yolo County were just wrong. They didn't really understand what it was. We were just sort of ignorant. We didn't get why 47 and 57 weren't great deals. And so he was going to help us with that by filing lawsuits against them, despite the fact that we continue to vote in that way year after year. I do not believe we're making a mistake in voting for those things. I do believe there will be problems. With most legislation comes different kinds of problems. But I also think that longer jail sentences, prison sentences, have not made these things better. So we can't look back and say, gee, if we only hadn't voted the way most of you all voted, we'd be better off right now. And oh, by the way, even though you later voted again like that, and then later voted against changing it, I'm still going to use your money to sue to get these things to stop. Mr. Reisig is wrong. I have appeared in Yolo County. And additionally, when I was in Solano County as a public defender, we heard notoriously about Yolo County, how many counts were charged against each defendant, how many long sentences when judges would tell us, oh, you guys are just lucky here because when I was in the public defender's office, because your clients don't get half of what they get in Yolo County for this stuff. It was often a joke. So I don't think we can look to that as the reason why why people might, like Mr. Reisig, might believe I don't understand the situation here. I do, and I think that what people want is an end to this bloated prison system that doesn't make anybody's life better. Prison is a necessary evil. It's a necessary thing. There are always levels of violence and death that are murder that are unacceptable, and people will have to go to prison for that. But they don't have to become warehouses for people who don't have a good lawyer, or for people who have done minor crimes, or people who have medical issues. Addiction is a medical issue. No matter how much we want to be angry at those folks who screw up their own lives, we have to understand that medical issues have to be treated medically, and that's the only way that we're going to get ahead on that.
Ms. Rodriguez, you recently refused to speak to the Deputy District Attorneys Association when asked if you wanted to seek their endorsement. How do you plan to lead the employees at the office if you won't speak with them?
I give out my phone number every day, all day long. Any deputy district attorney who wants to speak with me is more than welcome to. I was invited with little notice to a meeting where they informed me they were going to vote whether to endorse me or Mr. Reisig. It didn't seem very likely that people who work under him currently were going to decide that it was a good idea to inform him they weren't willing to support him. So I didn't really think that exercise was productive for me or for them. So, the inevitable is the inevitable, and I'm not going to let that stand in the way of me forming an excellent office. There are people who I think can be taught the right skills to do the right thing and see results that they are happy with. As I said, I led a very large attorney's office at the state. 97% of the people said that they felt that they were doing important work and that they were very appreciated. I've come in where other people stayed in the office and I became the leader, and the former leader had to be in the office, and they stayed because I created an atmosphere of respect and appreciation for people doing hard work. It's not an easy job to be a prosecutor, to be on any side of the law, because all your day is spent trying to explain what you know and what others can't see. But it is an important job, and people should be told what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and mature people accept that both of those things occur in all of us. We all make mistakes, we all do things well, and acknowledging that makes a happy office. I'm more than happy to speak to any deputy district attorney, any peace officer, anybody. I've had, as I said, at corrections, a lot of very close and great relationships with peace officers. And I know that my relationships in this county will be positive because that's what I feel works. You can't have a good office if you belittle or make people feel they have no control or no ability to do things the right way. And I never do that. But people do have to know what the hierarchy is and what needs to be done, and when their material will be reviewed, and when their answers will be accepted and when they won't. I've always been told that this office, the deputies generally in court will say they don't have any discretion, they don't have any capacity to deal, that all of that is with the higher ups and they can't go in and make their own choices. I don't think giving people that feeling will make them feel like they are doing the right things. I do believe in controlling things so that they're done well, but I don't believe that people who are taught that the only thing they can say is, I'm sorry, I have no power, are necessarily the people you want doing the state's business. Everybody needs to be respected, and everybody needs to be treated well.
So make no mistake, the DA is the chief law enforcement officer. That is the constitutional role of the job that we're both seeking tonight. And when you think about that, given that it's the chief law enforcement officer, shouldn't that chief law enforcement officer have a relationship with the law enforcement officers that are out working across our county? West Sacramento, Woodland, Davis, Winters, CHP, the sheriff. Yes, you have to have good working relationships. I said when I told you what I believe, we hold cops accountable and we get rid of bad cops, but you know what? We have to have strong working relationships with law enforcement. If you want something else in a DA, do not vote for me. I am not your candidate. If you don't want a DA that believes that relationships with law enforcement is critical, I am not your guy. And I would say, you know, San Francisco, Los Angeles, maybe those are your guys. We have over 100 staff in Yolo County, including 35 deputy district attorneys. Those deputy DAs are all highly educated. They come from a diverse background. They bring their own views, their own partisan views, their own ideological views. And these are well-trained, highly experienced, well-paid people. And guess what? They unanimously support me. That should tell you something. The people in my office support me because I've been running a good office for 16 years. And they know it. And all the police officers across Yolo County know it. I've been unanimously supported by all of them. Now, for some of you, that may be a red flag. Well, I don't want somebody that, you know, is supported by law enforcement. And again, I'd say, well, I'm not your guy. This race is very clear. You have a candidate who believes in the relationship between public safety and the DA, but also believes in reform. And I have a track record to prove that again and again and again. And you have a candidate that has never worked in Yolo County, that's never been a DA, that has no relationships with law enforcement, that is talking about essentially deconstructing the system. It's a polar opposite. And I'm not, you know, if you agree with that ideology, that's fine. But it's a crystal clear choice in this campaign, no doubt about it. And so I would say I'm very proud to have the support of my deputy DAs, many of whom are here. I wouldn't do the job if they didn't support me. I would leave tomorrow if they didn't. And I would leave tomorrow if the police officers didn't support me, because I frankly wouldn't want to live in a community where the DA was disliked or not supported or respected by the people that are out there protecting my family, period.
This question is directed to both candidates, but Jeff will start. What is your position on the capital punishment, death penalty moratorium signed into effect by Governor Newsom on March 13th, 2019?
So when Governor Newsom was running for office, before he was governor, he was asked the question, what are you going to do on the death penalty? Because if you all remember, the death penalty was on the ballot actually not too long ago, where the voters were asked to either affirm it or get rid of it, and the voters affirmed it. They said they wanted it. And what Newsom said when he was running was that he would not interfere with the will of the voters. And it's on tape and it's memorialized. And a few months later, after he was elected, he had a meeting in his office, and I was privy to the details of it from Mark Klass. Mark Klass was the father of Polly Klass, who was kidnapped in Napa, or Petaluma actually. She was kidnapped out of her bedroom, raped brutally, and murdered by a violent man who was sentenced to death. And Mark Klass has been an advocate for victims of crime his entire life in honor of his little girl, Polly. Well, Mark was one of 2 victims that the governor called to the governor's office the day that he held the press conference. And what Mark Klass told me is that he was ushered into a room with the governor, and the governor said, you know, I'm very sorry to tell you, but I'm going to be announcing today a moratorium on the death penalty. And Mark Klass said that at that moment, he felt like his daughter had been murdered all over again. Now, I don't care what you think about the death penalty, whether you support it or not. What the governor did was wrong. He made a promise, and he broke it, and he broke it in the face of this man. As far as, you know, the death penalty in Yolo County, we haven't sought a death sentence in many years. I view that, it's still the law, by the way, despite his moratorium. Other counties are seeking it. But I view it as a very limited option. And we haven't done it in over a decade. It's been a long time. And if the law changes, and if the voters get rid of it, that's fine. I'm not going to lose sleep over that fact, but I do. The question was directed to the moratorium. And so I'm telling you, I mean, another thing about me, not only am I a big believer in the relationships with law enforcement, but I also think the DA's #1 job is to protect victims of crime. and to advocate for victims of crime. And Mark Klass was a victim of crime. And every time I deal with a victim, I feel it in my heart. It keeps me up at night, and it's what gives me passion to come back and do this job, is to prevent victimization. And frankly, people who want to be a defense attorney, that's fine. We need a system. We need defense attorneys and we need prosecutors. It only works when we have both sides. But if your primary intention is to defend people who are being accused of crimes, be a public defender. And I'll see you in court. I'm a DA.
The governor decides to do what the governor decides to do. Prosecutors do what prosecutors are supposed to do. I don't need to sit in judgment of the governor. That's not the issue. The issue here for me is particularly that the death penalty has been a very big problem in our state for a long time. It's created a tremendous amount of expense, far more expense than life without possibility of parole ever created. In order to have a death penalty case, you have to have 2 attorneys as opposed to 1. You have to have investigators. The costs are sky high. The cost of prosecuting one and defending one are both paid by the state, and the cost of housing them in these death row settings that are highly different from other settings costs a lot more also. So that for the Taxpayers Association, it does not make sense to follow a death penalty when life without penalty of parole is basically what most people sentenced to death get anyway. And they don't have to spend nearly as much money to do it. We cannot continue to, we still have instances, for example, on the East Coast where people have been years, 10, 20, 30 years in prison and found to be innocent. DNA has changed things. Investigations have changed things. The death penalty isn't just about what we do, it's what we shouldn't be doing. We should not be taking the chance of executing innocent people because we are determined to follow the most expensive process possible to do something that almost rarely ever happens. So it's not logical to me that we would want to continue that. When I was in Solano County, there were a lot of death penalty cases pursued, and actually none of them were successful the year that I believe they had 7 or so. And the cost of doing them was just, really drove the county down, really caused tremendous expense issues. And so I don't want to make this all about money, but money is a consideration. We have to pay for these things. We have to think, what are we doing? Why is it successful? Why is it not successful? It's been long shown that the death penalty is not a driver of whether or not people commit the types of crimes they commit. They're almost always done with emotional things that come up during offenses, not months in advance. So without that as a reason to do it, without the incredible expense and difficulty for counties who pursue it and lose ability to even run counties properly because they spend so much money on it, and with the fact that our prisons don't ever even end up executing most people, the vast majority, why are we doing this? So I'm not upset that we have a moratorium on it, because I think we need to learn a lot more about how to be sure that people have even committed an offense, with people getting released 20, 30 years old later, having not done it, and being fairly mortifying of thinking that we are executing innocent people.
Ms. Rodriguez, will you state you have not and will not accept funding from George Soros or affiliated groups such as MoveOn.org and Justice Democrats?
I have not received any money from Judge Soros or anybody I know he supports or I'm aware of in any way. I've heard that rumor myself, and I always think, wow, that would be bizarre. I don't think George Soros has ever heard of me, and I'm not taking money from either of the groups that you've mentioned. I've never heard of them, and I don't even know what they are. I mean, I don't even feel I can necessarily pledge against something that I don't know what it is. That would be kind of inappropriate. But The money I have earned in this campaign has all been from individual donors. I don't have groups that have sent me money. I haven't sent myself any money. I haven't loaned myself any money. It's been from voters who want to change and have heard me speak and have heard about the plans that I have for the DA's office, my experience, my vast experience in dealing with budgets far higher than this DA's office has, in successfully saving large amounts of money, in successfully reforming systems that don't work, and making it so people get the result they need from the government programs that they're paying for. And that's what I will continue to do. I don't have any, I can't remember all the things I was supposed to say I didn't want to do, but I'm not aware of how George Soros gives out money, but he certainly has never offered any to me, and I don't have any plans to pursue any money from him. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but I've heard a lot of rumors about me, like that I wouldn't change my hair because I like looking funny and stuff like that. So you can put all those rumors away. I've always had naturally curly hair. I gotta look like this. And also I accept money from any kind of person who wants to see the justice system reformed in the way I have talked about reforming it, see racial bias be a thing of the past, and be sure that safety and good health and good programs are available to our community, because our community deserves that. As I said in the beginning, we have a gorgeous community here, a lot of great people, a lot of great futures, and that's what I want to promote, is community representation. I've heard Mr. Reisig say several things about how I want to let prisoners out, and I've never mentioned that. I've never even thought of that. I'm not here to let people out or to start new programs. None of the things, those may refer to other people. I don't know, but they don't refer to me. So I just tell you, I'm not going to do as he does and say everything's on my website. But you know, you can listen to me any day of the week and you will hear the same thing that I'm saying here. I'm for programs that work. I'm for saving the county money and expense for things that don't work, that are just window dressing. And I'm for making programs that serve more than a few people, well, how many people in this academy? How many people are getting into these programs? Not many. We don't see those numbers on this website. We don't see those numbers. We don't hear them coming from him. He keeps telling us, just look at what's going on. Just look what the Zach B says. Well, I guess he's telling them about those programs that have like 33 people every year and a half. That's not enough. That's not fair, and that's not enough. Everybody who qualifies for diversion or education should be in it, not just a few.
Yes.
I'll start just by addressing that and then talk about the Soros money and all that. So, you know, it's really easy to say that you're going to do all these amazing programs and you would do this, and you know, to criticize when you haven't done any programs yourself. I mean, when you haven't actually built any kind of program ever in this context, and that's really what this, you know, this attack is. And I'm used to it. I mean, as the DA, I get attacked every day by people that don't like decisions we made. But the fact of the matter is, if you can do the homework yourself, as I said, Google Yolo County District Attorney diversion programs and see what pops up. I don't control the Sacramento Bee, the LA Times. The reason we get so much attention for the programs that we've created is because they're highly successful, they're highly effective, and they're innovative. We've done things that have never been done before in treating the mentally ill and getting them diverted out of the path to prison and jail. I just got an email today from our second mental health court graduate. He emailed me because he read something she said, and he emailed me and he said, I want to tell you, Jeff, that I was your second candidate in mental health court many years ago, and my life was turned around because of the work that you did in that program with you and the Health and Human Services folks and everything else. And he said, you know, he's now got a great job, he's making great money, he's happy, and he said, everything Ms. Rodriguez has said that he looked at doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like San Francisco and Los Angeles. It sounds like a bunch of rhetoric, but there's no actual substance to what she's talking about because she hasn't done it. And that was his opinion to me. It was a great letter. I didn't solicit it, he just sent it to me. So, you know, when you talk about the programs that we've created, I stand on my record and I urge you to research them yourself. and look at who is talking about how fantastic they are in all of these different areas. When it comes to money, I'm just gonna say this. I don't know, if she's getting Soros money or not, I don't know. But what I can tell you is it is really important to look at who's giving candidates money. Because when you look at who's giving candidates money, it tells you a little bit about what the candidate is really all about, what their priorities are. Because the people that write those checks are often similarly aligned. And so, for me, I'm very proud to say that I have accepted donations across the board from business owners, from farmers, from regular folks, from school teachers, from law enforcement. Check it out. It's a public record, totally transparent. And you'll see that it's a broad base of support. I'm proud of that.
This is the last question, and then we'll have brief closing remarks. Jeff, you can start this. How beneficial are gang injunctions? What harm, if any, do they do to the community?
Well, it's a really outdated question because we had a gang injunction in Yolo County years ago that was in West Sacramento and Broderick. And it's a very complicated tool. They were used widely across Los Angeles and some parts of the Bay Area 15, 20 years ago. And the long story short is that this gang injunction, which was issued by a judge after almost a one-year hearing where this judge was hearing evidence from victims and witnesses that had been attacked, shot, stabbed, beaten by gang members in Broderick. The judge issued an order to the Broderick Boys gang, which she found to be true based on the evidence that the gang existed, that they had committed all these heinous crimes, that all of these victims and witnesses that she had heard from told the truth, and the judge issued this injunction order. And the injunction basically kept gang members from associating out in public and flying gang colors and doing gang activity. And it did it for, I believe it was a 5-year injunction, a 7-year, and then it sunsetted. So it's been gone for a little while now. But here's the deal, I've been keeping track of what has been going on in Broderick since that happened and talking to people who live there, and they tell me that it transformed the community in a positive way in a couple of different areas. Number one, the violent crime rate went way down. You saw much fewer gang stabbings, shootings, and murders. You also saw fewer young men going to prison because the gang injunction actually drove gang activity out of the Broderick area. Look at the data. And so the injunction was highly effective to those people who live out there and were actually victimized by the gang. Not everybody agrees with that. But gang injunctions are gone. They're not a tool that we'll ever use again, probably in my career, because the courts have struck them, and we've all decided we're done with it. Ours sunsetted, by the way, long before the courts struck it. But they were used widely across the state for many years, and like everything in criminal justice, things do evolve, and we move on to different tools. And that's what we're doing now in Yolo County with gang enforcement. We have a gang team that works in Yolo County, and it's a 3-prong approach: intervention, get to the kids early, try and get them out of the gang, give them opportunities to get out. The prevention piece, go to when they're really young, start talking to them about the dangers of it. We're doing that. Police officers in the room, some of whom I see have done that. And then on the enforcement side, if they commit violent crimes, we're going to prosecute, guaranteed. And in some cases, they will go to prison. If you shoot, stab, rob, rape, you're going to go to prison.
I've spent some time in West Sacramento, and I've talked to people who were there during the gang injunction. Then they're not 100 years old. It's very recent. My understanding is it sunsetted after 10 years, and that was in 2018. I could be misinformed by someone, but that's what I've been told by everyone I've spoken with. So this is not olden days. This is not an olden problem. These are people who are still suffering from what the gang injunction did to stifle the community. The community in West Sac is deeply traumatized by this gang injunction. It's not a small thing. There may be people who feel satisfied with what happened, but the first time I was in West Sacramento for a to go to a grocery store to pass out literature and talk to people. Mr. Reisig mentioned earlier that nobody knows who the DA is. Oh, everybody in West Sac knows who the DA is. Everybody who came out of that grocery store not only knew who he was, but knew somebody who had been hurt by the gang injunction, knew people in the community who had mental health issues, didn't have their medication for whatever reason, and couldn't get it again because they have all these charges against them, who went to prison. The term I heard most often was, we had a generation of children taken away from us. And certainly some of those people had problems with the law, but when you have youth being all charged as adults, and this county under the current DA has an incredibly large number of youth charged as adults, often under 16 when that was possible. Those were made as charges again and again and again and sent to prison, to adult prisons. And I think we need to realize that if we're going to take those actions, we need to be involved in healing the community, because the community is more than just the behavior of a few people who get in trouble, a few people are hurt by those people who get in trouble. The community is everybody. And when you have a community that can't heal, you have a very difficult place for people to have a positive life. People couldn't have Little League. Kids couldn't be together because if they were seen with somebody, even their own cousin or sibling, whatever, they could automatically be considered to be part of that gang. So when you talk to the people in West Sacramento, and hopefully no other community around here, they will tell you how hard it was to be a parent of a child, a teenager or a kid in in junior high or high school during those years. The pool closed, Little League closed, everything went downhill, and they were very struck by the fact that so many of their children were going into custody. So I think that, you know, as I've said before, prison is a necessary evil for some places. It is rarely okay for children, except in the case of very serious violent crime, and it is rarely the place where people get better. So if that's what we're doing it for, we need to rethink that, and the cost alone is very wildly out of proportion with any good that it does.
I would just like to offer closing remarks to both of you. We'll start wrapping this up. I want to thank the community. We are very, very fortunate to have two candidates who are both passionate on their beliefs. We as a society here in Yolo County are very fortunate to have this opportunity to be able to come out in a peaceful, safe environment and listen to the pros and cons of both of these candidates. They've given us a lot to think about. Some of us are pretty naive to what the DA has to do. We're naive to the fact of the crime that's out there. We're naive to the fact that children are having trouble. I personally am naive to the fact of why there's drug abuse and why is there homelessness. And both these folks really kind of opened up my eyes, and I'm sure it's given us all a lot to think about. I'd like to let each one of them give us a closing argument, and now anybody who wants to stay around afterwards or chit-chat for a few minutes, please feel free to. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming, and thank you all for listening so attentively and for understanding that we all have perspectives that will be considered when I'm the district attorney. I want to speak with all of you. As I said, I'd be happy to give out my phone number here also, and you're welcome to call me and tell me what your interests are in how we go forward in Yolo County. I'd like to be really clear that it's not correct to say that I haven't started and worked programs both for criminal issues, mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues. I've done all those things. I've worked at very high levels in the state, and I've worked for counties also. And I've seen programs that aren't here that work really well, and no reasons why we don't have them. I think also I've asked you all to think about the numbers. When is it sufficient to say, I did this, and when must it be said that I did this and made it available for all of you? And I think even though I've said that, we still haven't heard any numbers of how many people have been able to access mental health court. It's on the DA's website, and it's very few. And so I'm glad that the second guy who got through it is doing so well. But what about all the other people that year and every year since then who couldn't get in? Those programs need to be increased. Sacramento has applied for and gotten over $9 million in grants in order to introduce more mental health programs for specific problems. Hopefully it won't cause any problems. But that's what we need to be doing here. We need to be seeking more programs for different issues. We have a lot of mental health issues in modern society that are not even being touched here. And a lot of people who need that help, and without that help, are going to suffer unemployment and difficulty for their families, their children, their spouses, their neighbors. And we need to be thinking about how to do those things in the DA's office instead of arresting people and charging them with crimes when they're in the midst of a mental health crisis. All of those things need to be considered, and I haven't heard any numbers, and if you have, you should let me know what those numbers are. I think it's really important to realize that the DDAs and the law enforcement officers, all those people are people we want to work with the district attorney. And I can't come into it having worked as much with them as the person who's the DA. But it seems to me likely that before he was a DA and then the DA, he had close relationships with those people either. And let me say, I expect all my relationships to be professional. I don't expect them to be personal. I expect them to be that we are all working together for this county, for the same goals, for your safety, for your future, and for your family and the community's future. Because that's what this is about, is making a safe and wholesome and healthy life here for us in this wonderful county, Yolo. Thanks.
So I want to start by thanking the Taxpayers Association for putting this together, and it was a great venue and I agree, a good debate. This is how democracy works, and we'll do some more, I'm sure. But I want to close tonight by just highlighting a couple of things. When you talk about all of the changes that have happened in Yolo County in the last 10 years, and I'm using 10 years because that's when things have really turned on with our use of mental health courts and addiction intervention courts and neighborhood courts, restorative justice. You can look at the numbers, actually. They're transparent. They're on our website at the yoloda.org. And guess what? Thousands of people have gone through our programs. Neighborhood court, thousands of people. Mental health court, it's in the hundreds. Addiction intervention court, many. Those reports, we put out press releases and reports on a regular basis. We do it, Health and Human Services does it, the county does it. Again, with all due respect, I just don't think Ms. Rodriguez has any idea what we've been doing in Yolo County, in the DA's office and in the criminal justice system. Because as I've listened to her tonight, she's talking about things that we're already doing. And we're doing it at a scale that she has no comprehension. She doesn't know that we have 3 different mental health diversion programs that are serving people of misdemeanors and felonies. And the success rate we've had, it's all there. You can go look, and it's on published reports. So as I leave here tonight, I'll just say again, this candidacy, the 2 candidates, we are clearly opposite. Which 2 things are not like the other? Us. Because, as I said, I pride myself on being a balanced, traditional prosecutor with a deep streak of innovation and reform. That's what I've done. That's why DAs around the state voted me president. That's why the Sacramento Bee, which I don't think anybody here is going to say the Sacramento Bee is a conservative newspaper, would come out and write a headline like that and talk about all the programs and say that we are a model for modern prosecutors everywhere. I don't think any of that would happen if I was just up here spewing a bunch of rhetoric. Do your homework, and do your homework on Ms. Rodriguez, and I think what you'll find is that Yolo County is actually doing just fine with our district attorney. And I'm hoping I have your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate the turnout. We've all learned a little bit something tonight. Thank you. Have a safe trip home.